Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about some of the lessons that I learned as a user experience designer from our users. And as a UX designer and UX researcher, I feel like my role has mostly been connecting the creators and the product team with our users. And this is very pivotal, especially when it comes to emerging technologies like AR, because it's so easy to get fascinated by the innovation of the technology itself, the possibilities. And it's actually hard to keep the focus back into our users. But in the end, for any technology, it is true that whether it's a hype or it's here to stay, really depends on how often we turn to look on our users and what's that adoption rate. How often do they actually embrace the technology and think that it's something that they could use regularly. A little story about Kayak. So we did a SWOT week this summer, really fun event where for a week the employees get to form their own teams and work on their own projects. And from this cool week and this cool team that you see here came this feature for the iOS app of Kayak. It's an AR measurement tool for your baggage. So for the travelers, if you want to know if your carry-on can fit on the overhead space of the airplane that you're flying, you can just scan your carry-on, and it actually gives you your measurements and tells you if it's good or if you need to get another bag for that flight. So that was really fun to user test. I assisted as a user test subject myself and with internal user testing, but we also brought some external users to test the feature, so that was very interesting. And a few learnings from that. First of all, the eternal joy of AR. It's really cool to see how people get fascinated by it. It's a new technology. It makes people excited. But we have to remember, and that was mentioned in other talks as well, excitement doesn't mean that it's necessarily something they're going to adopt. Excitement can turn to frustration very easily, especially if they get caught up with technical hurdles. So the good thing that I was very excited to see was that users actually do read the copy. They do follow the instructions, which if you are on the UX industry, you probably know it's a bit of a struggle to make people actually read the instructions of your app. Something about the experience being clean, the experience focusing on a simple interface, and also maybe the uncertainty of using a new technology actually made people take into consideration the instructions. The other thing that was super interesting is the way that people reacted to the technology not working. So you saw a lot of the times stage demos here, people know how to deal with it. They put the screen more forward, backwards until it actually captures the target and works. Our users reacted in a much more physical way. They started surrounding the baggage, they squatted, they turned the phone upside down, as you can see in this segment. And what was really interesting to me, they actually moved the bag to scan it from the other side, which didn't work. So a lot of this input, we are fascinated to see and incorporate into the way that we give feedback to the people when they're using the app and the feature, and to guide them through the experience. So this got me thinking into some past experience with AR startups. That's where I started my UX career, immersed into the world of AR. And I started thinking what was different about UX best practices for regular apps and for AR apps. So when you're designing usually user interface, you are the creator of the whole world of the user. You can control everything that they're seeing. When you're doing user experience, you have to take into consideration the user. Who are they? Where are they? What are they? What's part of the user journey are they on? Are they browsing for ideas? Are they buying a product? But it gets even more intense when you're doing augmented reality. You have to take into consideration conditions that you may not be able to control, like where are they? What are the lighting conditions? What are they pointing their phone at? So sometimes you know these things, sometimes you don't. So I'm gonna pass you through very fast through some examples of my previous work. So this is an app that I did with Pivot the World for Harvard. This is a Harvard mobile tour, and it actually gives you access to historical pictures when you reach a location. So you reach the Widener Library, it pops up a historical picture of it. And what was interesting about it is that we know who the user is and where they are. They're a visitor, probably a tourist, probably, definitely in the area. So one thing that we tried to solve with AR was navigation, but that turned out to be a problem exactly because of the part of the user journey that our users were. AR actually consumes a lot of battery, so they didn't want to see their navigation through a camera view. So that was a feature we deprioritized because we user tested this and we realized it doesn't really fit the part of the user journey that the travelers were on. An app that you may remember from ARinACTION 2017, Building Conversation. That was a professional context kind of app because it was mostly targeted for architectural professionals who needed a means to communicate with their clients. This is either a 3D model on a small scale or a full-scale in-context geolocated model that you can walk through. The biggest challenge for that was jumping over some UX best practices to fit the menu and navigations that were required for this. A lot of complicated actions, micro adjustments of the geolocation, adjustments of the altitude. So a lot of nested navigations, transparent menus, that kind of stuff. And jumping into a project that I advised on the experience on, I thought architects were a tough crowd. Actually, kids are a much tougher crowd. So this app is Biotia, an education company. And it's a nice, heartwarming story about a whale that finds everything about their friend special, but then has a moment of self-doubt, am I special? And I love the way that AR helped the underlining messages of the story, but what the kids really found fascinating were the ways that they could break the app's storyline. So they loved playing with the app the first time that they saw the story. The second time they saw the story, they wanted to put themselves in there. So they had a system when they were user testing this, they had the book, the iPad on top, and then they were projecting the story on the wall. So the children would just try to go on the wall, they would dance around with the animals, and they would put their heads between the book and the iPad, trying to get themselves immersed in the story. So that really defined the way that we are thinking about next versions. How do we allow the kids to actually explore this environment on their own way? So, couldn't be a UX talk without reminding you, you're not the user. This is especially true when it comes to augmented reality. And the differentiating parameter is that you're an expert in this technology, and most of your users are not, especially when it comes to apps that are available through smartphones. So always do some kind of persona segmentation when you're working for your users. This is the example of the apps that I just showed. We're talking about professionals, travelers, or children, but we could also look at it from the perspective of technology that they're looking. And the common space between the three segments is that they're using smartphone technology. I could ask you, do you have any ideas how these three types of users are segmented? Motivation is a good one. Actually, the first user is true, very motivated. They love AR. They're probably in this room. They probably have invested technology, money into buying a technology or hardware. Yes? Exactly. And the unfamiliar one I call the accidental user. They could just stumble upon the feature of the AR app, like our kayak users. They won't download the kayak app because of the AR features, but they might look at this feature and know that's familiar. Or some of the other applications that were mentioned today, museum applications, you might use it once when you're visiting there, but you're not necessarily a day-to-day user. So for the last two categories, it's really important to actually empathize with the user and try to figure out how they're looking at technology, how they might actually try to break it, and try to figure out what makes them different than you. So, as lessons learned, identify and segment the user types to better serve their needs. Guide your user through the experience, but also make sure to allow the behaviors that are unpredictable to shape their experience. And finally, and very importantly, user tests is such a powerful tool to understand how your users are using the technology. And what I like to say is don't demo, user test. Demo is meant to wow your users and show the possibilities, but user test is focused on your users, and it's about seeing how they interact with it. So if you want to talk more UX, you can find me outside or email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alkistis.